The proceeding will start shortly. 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 The proceeding will start shortly.
Order. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin, can I remind members that they're expected to wear face coverings when not speaking in the debate. This is in line with current government guidance and that of the House of Commons Commission. Members are also asked by the House to have COVID lateral flow tests twice a week if coming onto the parliamentary estate, and this can be done either at the testing centre, which is what used to be the Members' Centre in Portcullis House, or of course at home. And please do give each other and members of staff space when seated and when entering and leaving the room. Mr. Elliot Colburn, to move the motion, please.
Thank you, Sir Roger, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I beg to move that this House has considered E-petition 590405, entitled Dedicate Funding for Research into Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, or FOP. This petition closed with 111,186 signatures, including 162 from my own Caulfield and Wellington constituency. I'd like to begin, Sir Roger, by thanking the petition creators, the Bedford Gay family, FOP friends, and Drs. Alex Bullock and Richard Keane for meeting with my office to share their stories, experiences, and expertise of FOP. I'm incredibly grateful for their help, not only in preparing myself, but preparing other honourable and right honourable members for today's debate, and I know that many colleagues are keen to speak this afternoon, not least of all my right honourable friend, the member for Hemel Hempstead, who has been a champion for his constituents on this issue, and I look forward to hearing his contribution. I will keep my colleagues brief to give every colleague the opportunity to speak. But I'd just like to set out firstly what FOP is. FOP is a rare, very rare, genetic degenerative condition that causes the body's bone to develop in areas where it normally wouldn't, progressively locking joints in place and making movement more difficult and eventually impossible. Eventually, those with this condition will become 100% immobile, almost like a human statue with a healthy mind locked inside a frozen body. It's one of the most debilitating and disabling conditions known to affect children in their early years with no treatment, cure or prevention. Once it progresses, there is no way to reverse its trauma because trauma causes more activity. Something as small as a knock, a bump or even a fall can trigger more bone growth. Likewise, the trauma of misdiagnosis and related medical treatments, such as biopsies and injections, can also trigger bone growth. Even unrelated illnesses like flu can trigger bone growth. So I can only imagine the stress and the horror of the last 2 years during the COVID-19 pandemic for these families who have children suffering with FOP. FOP does its worst damage in a child's early years. Whilst the condition will progress over time and at different rates, and no two individuals will have the same journey, most people with FOP are immobile by the age of 30. The statistics and details of FOP are powerful, but not as powerful as the stories of those sharing their experience of this condition. And I'm very grateful to the petition creators, Helen and Chris Bedford-Gay, for sharing their experiences of Oliver's story. When their son Oliver was 3 months old, he had what some medical professionals considered to be funny toes and a lump that began to appear on the back of his head. Oliver's consultant concluded that the lump was not cancerous but should be removed nonetheless. Shortly after Oliver's first birthday, the consultant diagnosed him with FOP. The family were led to believe that he would be fine as long as he avoided contact sports such as rugby. And it was only later, when Oliver's parents searched for more information themselves, that they discovered the true implications of what a diagnosis of FOP would mean. FOP results from a single gene mutation, which was only discovered in 2006, so there is very little information or experience on this condition which is easily available to the public or indeed to medical professionals. And therefore, consequently, with such a large barrier to access relevant knowledge and guidance, the Bedford-Gay family was seemingly alone, with nowhere to turn for help and support. At this point, there was just a small patient group, but no dedicated UK charity to supporting families with FOP, and indeed funding research. So this prompted the Bedford-Gay family to establish the Oliver's Friend family, or now known as the FOP Friends. And in short, FOP Friends aims to further the research into FOP and related conditions by supporting current and future research projects, as well as supporting families suffering from the condition and raising awareness. Since the charity began, FOP Friends have raised over £700,000 to help their work. FOP Friends have now been able to work alongside the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital, the FOP research team at the University of Oxford, and other international FOP patient organisations on this fight. Since Oliver's diagnosis, thanks to these organisations, there have been leaps forward in the research, in awareness, and indeed in treatment. However, there remains so much more to be done, and it cannot be done alone. So FOP Friends are calling for 3 key asks of government. Firstly, to increase research funding into FOP. I understand my right honourable friend, the member for Hemel Hempstead, will no doubt delve deeper into this topic, so I will not steal his thunder. But the University of Oxford FOP research team, led by Dr. Alex Bullock, has been investigating how the mutation that causes FOP is activated in patients and what might be able to stop this from progressing. However, this research receives no government funding. Their research into a new drug, which could be used to treat FOP, has been put on ice due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is unlikely that external funding will be sourced to conclude this clinical trial. As a rare condition which only impacts 1 in a million people, many consider there to be no commercial incentive to fund FOP research. However, because of what FOP causes, research into it could help solve problems in unwanted bone growth, and conversely, how to encourage it in other major disease areas, including military injuries or surgeries, severe burns, osteoporosis, or heart disease, for example. FOP is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this research. Unfortunately, there is no mechanism for the Oxford team to obtain emergency funding for a clinical trial which is already underway. And whilst the government has pledged over £6.6 million of funding via the National Institute of Health Research and UK Research and Innovation for more general bone disease research, there is some confusion about how this has or will be applied to FOP research. As I understand it, this funding hasn't been seen by the Oxford research team, so I would be grateful if the Minister could shed some light on this issue and the potential mechanism for this team to access emergency research funding. Secondly, the petitioners are calling for the government to transform the standard of care that patients receive. The government's rare diseases policy, the UK Rare Diseases Framework, offers a vital opportunity to transform and improve standards of care for patients and families across the country. With only a handful of NHS clinicians with FOP experience, FOP patients receive varying levels of medical care and home support. I am aware that FOP Friends do amazing work assisting families in school settings with education, as well as health and care plans. Carers of FOP patients are often parents or siblings, as the specific needs of FOP patients can be tricky for others to understand or manage. And too often, those who suffer from FOP and their families have their ability to work, live and contribute to society limited by this condition without wider institutional support. So I would be grateful if the Minister could confirm and outline further how the UK Rare Diseases Framework could better support families and patients with FOP. Thirdly, the petitioners are calling for the government to help increase awareness of FOP and transform diagnosis. As I mentioned earlier, as a fairly newly discovered condition, there is a serious lack of knowledge and experience in FOP. Misdiagnosis and mistreatment, such as biopsies and vaccinations, etc., can cause the condition to worsen and trigger irreversible bone growth. Early diagnosis is absolutely crucial, not just to treat this condition, but also to prevent avoidable early progressions, which is why it's so important to raise awareness of FOP amongst medical practitioners. Now, I understand there have been calls to make the teaching of FOP mandatory in medical schools, so I would appreciate if the Minister could say a few words on that issue as well. A genetic test does exist to confirm the diagnosis of FOP, but currently only specialist clinicians can request this test. An application has been made to include FOP as part of the rollout of the NHS Genomics Medicine Service, which is funded by NHS England, and allow a wide range of clinicians to request a test if they suspect FOP. Now, I understand the directory of approved tests will be updated in April 2022, and I hope the Minister can enlighten us as to whether FOP will be included in this, as this will increase access to genetic testing and reduce time to diagnosis. I'd like to once again, Sir Roger, pay tribute to Oliver and his family, as well as the many other organisations, researchers, campaigners and other families who have worked tirelessly to fight FOP, many of whom I'm sure we will hear about this afternoon. But I appreciate there are many other colleagues that want to get in, especially the Right Honourable Member for Hemel Hempstead, who has got a great degree of knowledge in this area. So I will bring my remarks to a close, and I hope that we can have a productive debate on this issue and the key asks that have been outlined by the petitioners.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 590405 relating to research into Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva. Mike Keynes.
Thank you, Sir Roger. Pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today, and a real honour to follow the member for Carshalton and Wellington, whose speech was exemplary in this field, and thank you to him for leading us on this e-petition. And my thanks to those who've got this petition to get over 100,000 signatures for something that's so rare. Is an incredible campaign. And while I'm on my feet, to thank the member for Hemel Hempstead, who leads us admirably in this subject across the House, and he has my full support anything going forward in terms of this subject. Now, it's a an honourable member heckles me that he'll hold me to it, and so he should, and he won't find me wanting. It's a great honour to talk about FOP today, Sir Roger. I'm here on behalf of a young constituent that I have, Oliver, who lives in Wythenshawe and Sale East, my constituencies, with his brothers, Leo and Harry, and his mum and dad, Chris and Helen. I'd like to welcome Chris here today in the gallery and thank him for taking the time to tell me about Oliver and about how FOP has impacted their family life. Oliver, who is now 14, was diagnosed in 2009 with FOP. It impacts 1 in 2 million people, and there are just 800 diagnosed cases in the world and only 50 in the UK. It's effectively a single letter which changes or mutates on the genome and results in bone growth in muscles, ligaments and tendons over time. Usually children are severely impacted by the time they are 10 years old and are often contorted and immobile by the age of 20 and have average life expectancy of around 40 years. I've enjoyed hearing about Oliver and reading about how he loves to read and to play badminton and to go to scouts, including to camp, where he slept in a hammock in the rain, Sir Roger. Not something I would do, but nonetheless a mark of his extraordinary resilience. Oliver and his family have shown, they really have shown resilience in the face of adversity, as many families do who suffer with this condition. It's right for me also to pay tribute to the staff and pupils at his school, Sale High, in my constituency, who have given Oliver the opportunity to become more independent and to make friends on his own terms, letting him leave lessons shortly before the end of class, apart from history, apparently, which he insists on staying until the end because it's his favourite subject, so that he's not jostled in the corridor while moving from classroom to classroom. These small adjustments give Oliver and his friends the opportunity to live as every 14-year-old should, with increasing independence and agency. And can I place on record my personal thanks to Jane O'Grady, who I know well as head teacher at Sale High School, who does a remarkable job, and I look forward to continuing to work with her to improve the fabric of that school, which is so desperately needed. Oliver's family and the wider FOP community have been phenomenal in their efforts to secure funding into FOP, and the FOP Friends, the charity they've set up, is the only charity in the UK which focuses on research into this condition. It receives no government funding at all. It is believed that advances into FOP research could then have implications into more common bone conditions, because if we know why bone forms in the way it does in cases of FOP, researchers think the same knowledge could be applied to people with limb damage, with osteoporosis, and it could be helpful in the cases of joint replacement. Developments made in FOP could eventually save the NHS money in care costs. And while rare diseases are individually rare, they are within the population quite common, affecting 1 in 17 people at some point in their lifetime. The government recognises the challenges faced by people affected by rare diseases, including ultra-rare conditions such as FOP, and in January 2020 they published the UK Rare Disease Framework. This framework states its goals to be helping patients get a faster final diagnosis. It also seeks to raise awareness of rare diseases among healthcare professionals. For example, there are only 3 doctors in the UK who have a specialist interest in FOP. So Roger, in summing up today, I would like to pay tribute to Oliver himself and ask if there is more we can do to enable people like Oliver and other diagnosed with rare diseases in the UK to feel confident that we hear them and will support research into this line with the government's own framework. Thank you.
Sir Mike Penning.
And it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, which I've done for many years, so it's a pleasure again today. Many of us in this room are parents or grandparents or godparents to children. And the bit that's so amazing about this petition, which is we're debating today, is for such a rare condition, how quickly over 100,000 people said we have to do something about this. Now, petitions come and go, Sir Roger, but actually, if you only got a look at the photographs of what this condition does to human beings, you've only got to Google FOP and look at what the videos on Facebook and other things, where it's had such a devastating effect on people's life expectancies and their loved ones. And for me, every child deserves the chance to have a childhood. Every child. But this condition, to all intents and purposes, removes that. It is a life-damaging, life-reducing condition, which is so rare that, as my colleagues have just said, very often, when it is presented in front of top physicians, top consultants, some with over 30 years' experience, they've never seen it before. And in my constituent situation, Alexia and Dave, when they first saw Lexi, they already had a lovely child, Ronnie, who's now 3. And they looked at the child, like we all did when we searched for our grandchildren or our first child, or any of our children, and they, as parents, said, there's something wrong. When they said to the specialists, the doctors, there's something wrong with her feet. And she was told she had bunions. This is a newborn child. And quite rightly, they questioned it. And they questioned it, and they questioned it. And in the end, Lexi was probably the youngest child in this country to be diagnosed with FOP. And then she joined, which is now the Friends, FOP Friends. And the community has been formed to try and do 2 things, Sir Roger. One, to actually understand how this and why this progresses and to stop that movement going forward. I'll come back to that in a second. And then for other parents that are going to have children, to try and understand how you don't have a child with a genetic change at conception and actually allow things to be addressed. That research is only being done in one place in this country, Sir Roger, and it's been done at Oxford, the Oxford University, and it's purely funded by FOP Friends, purely funded by them. And they've worked with their colleagues abroad in Pennsylvania and around the world, which is, we don't really know around the world how many children are born with this. They are born with it. It happens at conception. We don't really know, because in other parts of the world, they don't even understand what FOP is. There is a really dynamic specialist in America that has worked with the families over many, many years. And in America, there are groups that come together from all over America. I saw a video of them barn dancing together only the other days. But actually, many of them are frozen in their skeleton. And I circulated earlier on to colleagues some photographs. Those photographs, if anybody's got a heart in this country, are heartbreaking. An 8-year-old child in those photographs, just 8 years of age, that has a deformity in her spine, which is frightening to the parents. And what we need to do, perhaps, is say to the government, from across this House and from across society, the government are doing wonderful work, governments have done wonderful work, but the government in particular are doing wonderful work in this area of rare diseases, rare conditions. But this is so rare, it falls out the bottom. How can it be right in this day and age that we have to fundraise? And there was a wonderful fundraising event at my local football club that was done by my local Hemel Hempstead Town Football, to raise money for the research that the NHS is going to benefit from. And as it was said earlier on, Sir Roger, this has knock-on effects into other conditions as to how bone structure grows and how it doesn't grow and why it grows and where it grows. But in these conditions, we have a child, that's my constituent, that is probably never going to crawl. She'll probably walk before she crawls. She's never going to have that experience. Her parents are going to never have that experience of saying, where is she gone? Which we've all had it with our children when they've been crawling away and exploring life. Because her neck is now starting to freeze at 10 months of age. So what I would say to the Minister is that we can go into great detail, which my colleague did in great detail, about the different types of research. We can go into the different things as to why we can't do it. And I'm sure the Minister will turn around and say, well, I can't give a blank cheque. Let's see what the research can produce. But until we know how much money we've got for the research, we can't actually say what can be done. And what I can say, Sir Roger, is there was a small group of us in this House today, and my colleague, honourable colleague for South West Arts, couldn't be here with us this afternoon, but I know he wanted to be. And I've spoken to lots of colleagues across the House, and we are not going to go away. And depending, of course, on what the Minister says, and she may shock us all and write a blank cheque for us, but actually I fully understand why she won't, but actually what we do need some progress. We need to say that these children are so important that no matter if there's 1 in a million or 500 in a million, these children's lives and their futures is important, so that they can possibly see some light at the end of the rainbow. These parents are doing everything they can for their loved ones. Isn't it about time that the government and us in Parliament did everything we can for these children? And by the way, Sir Roger, I think we probably need to fill the House of Commons main chamber on a debate on this subject, because the more people that hear it, understand it, see the photographs, see the distress, and seeing children having their childhood robbed from them when they were conceived, the more chance we might have of getting the money in the 2 areas we need for the research. Thank you very much, Sir Roger.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Sir Roger, for calling me in this debate. And can I too add my congratulations to the mover of the petition today, and for the opportunity for us all to have an opportunity to speak about this rare disease and how it affects some of our constituents. Sir Roger, it is absolutely amazing that we're actually having this debate when you consider how rare this disease is. And it says something about the temerity and the strength of feeling that there is with those who are friends of FOB and those who suffer from the condition and those who are in our society who are just genuinely concerned that this matter weighs so heavily upon them that it has to be brought to this House. When I consider that 1 in a million, 1 in 2 million may get this condition, it's amazing that they've been able to lobby and cajole and persuade and encourage people to sign this petition and get it to the floor of the House. And that should not just be left on its own. That should not be underestimated, just how significant an effort has been made by so few. And it is important. In my own constituency, I think that the largest petitioning group in Northern Ireland, 658 petitioners. Across every constituency in Northern Ireland, between 100 and 200 constituents did this. And yet in Northern Ireland, there's only known to be 2 cases. Now, that says something of the power of lobby. And it puts a great onus on members in this House that our public, our community have felt so strongly that this matter has to be debated, even though it affects a very small section of our society. And I think that's what Parliament is about. Parliament is about helping the most vulnerable, about those who are left behind, about those who can be forgotten. And it is absolutely certain that without this debate, FOB would hardly have been heard of. It would have been discussed amongst those who have a genuine interest or have had a connection with someone with the condition or a family. But the day to get it on the floor of this House is incredibly important. Indeed, it is landmark. And that is important to say. Each of my colleagues have mentioned, each of our members have mentioned an individual who they've known. And I've been contacted by Lucy Fretwell and Zoe, her sister, who both have this condition. Sisters. Incredibly rare that not only one would have, but both would have it. And they wrote to me and said that this only affects 1 in a million people. Unfortunately, FOB has affected my sister and I, and we have been diagnosed with this disease. Zoe and I have been living with this condition now for some years. We're the only 2 people in Northern Ireland that suffer from FOB. But I'm so concerned that this matter must be debated, and she implored us to be in this debate today. And so it's a privilege. It's a privilege for me to speak for Zoe and for Lucy today. And of course, I give way.
Friend, giving way. And actually, part of this debate is about we don't really know how many people are out there. The misdiagnosis that we've seen, and as I'm referring back to, if you Google search, you know, people had amputations because in other countries because they thought this was actually cancerous, and actually made it, not only was the amputation made it worse, but the bone. So if we had better diagnosis and better expertise out there and a better knowledge out there, I think the figures will be much higher in the province.
I think the member makes the absolute right point. It's only through awareness that we actually know that this condition is actually probably much broader and deeper within our society, and that those few who have been diagnosed, they are obviously encouraged and energised to write to us and to lobby for it. But the member's absolutely right. This is only the tip of the iceberg because these people know about the condition. There's many, many others. I mean, I for one do not believe that over 2,000, 3,000 people from Northern Ireland petitioned in this matter because of 2 people. There were many, many more, and that's across the society. But still, we have to look at the facts that are in front of us and relay them to the House. Mr Chairman, could I leave one other point in the debate today, and that is that the government has a framework for dealing with rare diseases. And this UK framework is critically important because it gives the government 2 commands and says that it will do 2 things: that it will help patients and that it will increase awareness. Now, frankly, today we're doing the second part of that. We're increasing awareness. We're having this debate. We're encouraging the government to be more active and to respond on these matters. And the increasing awareness is vitally important. But the helping patients issue, frankly, no member in this House can do anything about that. It's government can do something about that by doing what these petitioners say, directing resources into this rare disease, into this research, making sure that not only that research is dedicated and focused, but that hopefully will have outcomes. And if there's any country in the world that should be proud of what medical research delivers, it has to be this nation. Look at what we delivered in the last 2 years through research, through targeted, effective research. Now, if that's what we can do under emergency conditions, what more can we not do if there's some targeted research and resources directed at this condition? And I, like many others, implore the government to listen to the pleas from Lucy and from Zoe and from the many thousands of others that we're aware of. And I would encourage the government to respond positively to this petition. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Andrew Selous.
Thank you very much, Mr Gale. It's always a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I too pay tribute to my honourable friend for Caulfield and Wallington, my honourable right honourable friend for Hemel Hempstead, and indeed all colleagues who've spoken, because party politics comes nowhere near this debate today. We're all here with one purpose, which is to raise the publicity about Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, to give it its full name, which I'll refer to as FOP from now onwards. And I'm not aware that I have a constituent with this condition, but 584 of my constituents signed that petition, and I took that as a direct instruction from them as my employers, as that's who they are, to be here today. I suspect that had something to do with my right honourable friend from Hemel Hempstead being so active on this issue as one of my constituency neighbours. But as colleagues have said so far, I too am very proud to live in a country in which 111,000 people have signed a petition relating to 80 children, young people in the main, that we are aware of, although I absolutely take the point there could be quite a few more that have not been correctly diagnosed. And that is humbling. It's just worth pausing on as a moment. We're a nation of 67 million people. You know, you might think something that affected 80 people didn't really matter, but it does matter hugely because all of those individuals matter as individuals, and that's what we are talking about today. Now, Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, it's a variable and progressive illness. It can lock a person's jaw, can make eating, talking and dental care extremely difficult, can lead to breathing difficulties. And I've looked at some of the photographs which my right honourable friend Emma Hempstead brought into the debate, and they tell a powerful story as well for those people who want to Google them. Now, I was very interested to read about the trial of palovarotene. I understand there were 107 participants in it. You might think that's not a particularly large number, but as we just said, this is a very rare disease, so it's significant. And I understand in that trial we saw that 62% of people treated with palovarotene saw a reduction in new heterotopic ossification volume. So that does seem encouraging. I'm not a clinician myself. I don't know if that would be a high enough result in order to put this drug into widespread use, but to me it certainly seems encouraging. And I too want to pay tribute to the researchers at the University of Oxford who've done amazing work, as we all know, on vaccines for the pandemic earlier this year, and isn't it incredible that they are researching into FOP as well. I'm pleased that our government has a rare diseases framework. It's published in January this year. When I read through it, preparing for this debate, I thought what it was aiming to do was absolutely right, if I can say that to the Minister and the Department. The four priorities have already been spoken about today: helping patients get the right diagnosis faster, proper awareness of rare diseases amongst healthcare professionals, priority 2, thirdly, better coordination of care, and fourthly, improving access to specialist care, treatment and drugs. To me, they all seemed absolutely right, and there are 5 themes, underpinning themes that go along with that framework, namely patient voice, national and international collaboration, and we've already heard about the research at both the University of Oxford and the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm sure researchers are talking to each other and following each other's work in both those universities. And there's the digital data and technology, so important, so that knowledge flow can take place and people can be aware of the latest research. Then wider policy alignment in how we look after people with FOP, and then finally the research, which we have all been talking about. Now, I understand that the National Institute of Health Research has funded 8 studies in this area, which I am pleased about, but I've also heard that FOP friends are funding a very great proportion of this research. So I do have a suggestion for the Minister that I know she won't be able to respond to now, but I would ask her just to take it back to the Department and to discuss it with the Secretary of State and with officials. But what I understand from the research I've done for this debate is that research into FOP would also help not only the victims of FOP, but people with military and blast injuries, people with joint replacements, severe burns, sporting injuries, osteoporosis, heart disease, atherosclerosis, and chronic anemia. So the thought I had coming into this debate today, Sir Roger, was that if we just took the smallest proportion, maybe even 0.1% of the funding for all those research into all those other conditions and earmarked it for FOP, we would probably not really severely impact the research into those other conditions at all, but we would provide a significant additional pot of money into FOP research, which would be, I would say, a legitimate transfer of funding, given the benefits that FOP research would have to those other medical conditions. So I just give that to the Minister for her consideration. I don't know whether it's feasible or not, or could be done, but it might be a way in the short term, when budgets are tight as they are at the moment, to try and get more research into this area. The point about medical schools, I think, is really, really important. I do have a lot of sympathy for medical students. They have an awful lot of things to learn in their 5-6 years at medical school. But even so, given how serious FOP is, I think, and the amount of misdiagnosis, we're hearing about the amputations, the treatment, the cancer treatment, which ironically makes, or not ironically, but tragically makes FOP worse, does show the importance of medical students, the doctors of the future, knowing about FOP so we can try and get those affected on the right treatment pathway as soon as possible. So please, can we look at the research into related areas to see if a little bit of that funding could go to FOP, and just make sure that it really is on the radar of the medical schools, so we have more than 3 clinicians in the UK who are expert in this field. We will need to significantly increase that number to do the right thing by people affected. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now come to the front benches, and the SNP spokesman, Adam Kayser, please.
Thank you, Sir Roger, and it is Sir Roger Gale, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I thank the honourable member for Caulfield and Wellington for leading this important debate. And I am not aware of any constituents who have been diagnosed with FOP, Sir Gale, but I also thank everyone that signed the petition, including 104 people in my constituency of Airdrie and Shotts. Sir Gale, I'd like to start by thanking the honourable member for Wythenshawe and Sol East for setting the scene so clearly, and I echo his comments that more funding is required. And I was heartened to hear that Oliver School are making appropriate changes to accommodate him. And can I place on record that I'm especially pleased to hear that he enjoys history, and that's one of his favourite subjects, and I say that as a former teacher of social subjects. That brings me great joy. I completely agree with the honourable member for Hemel Hempstead when he says that FOP is incredibly rare, and it is indicative of democracy that so many people have signed this petition. And I'd like to place on record again my thanks to him for sharing the story of Lexi, and for all the work that he does in raising awareness of FOP. And the power of lobby, as the honourable member for North Antrim says, is so vital to democracy. And I welcome that this rare disease has been brought to our attention on the floor of the House. And he spoke powerfully of the 2 sisters, Lucy and Zoe, and how they're the only 2 known cases in Northern Ireland. And I also echo his comments that there's a genuine concern that's been raised today that actually misdiagnosis may mean that the figures are higher than we think. And I also thank the honourable member for South West Bedfordshire, who spoke powerfully of the positive progress that has been made in tackling and raising awareness of this rare disease. And I'd like to take a moment to thank Chris and for launching this petition. And Chris and his family, as has been said, created the FOP Friends after his son Oliver was diagnosed with this rare disease. And at the time of his diagnosis, there was no charity in the UK that was focused on supporting those with the disease. And since its creation, FOP Friends has helped to support those with FOP and their families and raise awareness, raise genuine good public awareness over the need for medical research on the disease. Sir Gale, currently there is no known cure for FOP, and the disease is caused by a mutation in a gene, with the mutation only being discovered some years ago. And due to the rarity of the disease, research has been stated is limited in the United Kingdom, and only the University of Oxford has a dedicated programme looking into FOP, with most of the funding for the research coming from donations from charities like FOP Friends. The lack of... Yes, I'll give away.
And if I'm wrong, then perhaps the record will be correct. I think all of the funding, which is really very important, comes from fundraising by the Friends of FOP.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention, and it was simply me misreading. My apologies. And yes, he is correct that all the funding comes from FOP Friends. And this lack of proper funding into research is holding back progress into finding a cure, and further progress can be made by improving the levels of potentially international cooperation in researching the disease. The benefits of finding a cure to FOP are numerous, and was said by the Honourable Member for South West Bedfordshire, may not be limited to just helping those with FOP, and by improving our knowledge of what causes FOP and its potential cure, the medical profession may gain invaluable insight which can help combat more common health problems such as osteoporosis, fractures and battlefield injuries. In January 2021, the UK released the UK Rare Disease Framework. The framework aims to improve the lives of those living with rare disease like that of FOP. And the document proposes a four-nation approach to support those living with a rare disease and includes nation-specific action plans that aim to improve the effectiveness of combating rare diseases. And it's hoped, Sir Gail, that the plan will help patients to receive a quicker diagnosis, increase awareness within the healthcare profession in spotting the signs of rare diseases like FOP, and improve access to specialist care, treatment and drugs. And the Scottish Government understands the importance of this framework and is committed to implementing the 51 commitments set out in the strategy. The Scottish Government also welcomes the progress that's been made in Scotland in delivering genomic medicine and empowering patients through the UK's Rare Disease Forum, but of course more still can be done. And so over the next 2 years, the Scottish Government will continue to develop an action plan that works closely with the rare disease community. The consultation will ensure that those with a rare disease, including those like FOP, are appropriately reflected in governmental policy, and this ensures that those with rare diseases have proper access to services in areas such as mental health and social care. And the Scottish Government remains fully committed to ensuring that there's continual improvement in supplying patient-centric care which is safe and effective for those living with a rare disease. And I'm going to make progress. To better detect rare diseases like that of FOP, the Scottish Government has allocated an additional £4.3 million over the next 2 years to ensure that regular genetic testing includes tests for rare diseases. Improvements in genetic testing will help to increase the number of rare diseases picked up by these tests, allowing doctors to provide the correct support and treatment to patients. And the Scottish Government is committed to doing what it can to improve the lives of those living with rare diseases, but fully appreciates that more still can be done. And I'll quickly give way.
So Roger, I fully appreciate, take that thing off, I fully appreciate that it's a devolved matter. But these children, in many cases, don't have 2 years. So while the consultation goes on for 2 years, and the Honourable Lady has seen some of the photographs, that's the condition that's going to deteriorate with life-threatening diseases. So I appreciate it is devolved in Scotland, but like in England and Wales, Scotland have got to come and say 2 years is too long, let's sort it out now.
Thank you, Sir Gail, and I thank the member for his contribution, and I don't think anyone here would disagree that more needs to be done by all governments in tackling this. And he spoke very powerfully of his constituent, and it's incredibly important that government ministers in all 4 nations are listening very clearly. In conclusion, Sir Gail, I hope that the Minister and the Government will agree with me that more funding is required to combat rare diseases like FOP, and I look forward to hearing her contribution. This petition has helped to genuinely raise awareness of an incredibly rare disease, and I again want to place on record my thanks to the family for bringing this to the floor of the House and encouraging people to sign the petition. And it also highlights the need for action by governments to combat rare diseases. And I hope it is not too long until we find a cure for FOP for Oliver and for loads of other children across the 4 nations like him.
Thank you. The spokesperson for the opposition, Elliot Colburn, please.
Thank you, Sir Roger. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I want to thank the Honourable Member for Caulfield and Wallington for bringing this debate on behalf of the Petitions Committee. As we've heard, Sir Roger, despite Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, or FOP, being a ultra-rare disease affecting only 1 in a million, over 111,000 people have signed this petition, including 162 people from his constituency and 108 from my own, showing the high level of public support for this issue. I also want to pay tribute to the contributions from the Right Honourable Member for Hemel Hempstead, whose constituent Lexi has recently been diagnosed with FOP, and to Lexi's mother, Alex and father Day, who have been instrumental in the petition's success, while also raising money for research themselves and raising awareness. I was pleased to see that there were signatures from all across the country, but the support in Hemel Hempstead massively outweighed anywhere else, evidencing the incredible drive and leadership that has been shown on Lexi's behalf. And I want to pay tribute to the Right Honourable Member for Hemel Hempstead. The Right Honourable Member highlighted, as have colleagues from who have spoken today, have all highlighted the issues around the lack of funding and the need to raise awareness. I also want to pay tribute to we had lots of excellent contributions, so I want to pay tribute to the member for Wavenshaw and Sale East, the member for North Atrium, member for South West Bedfordshire, for highlighting the cases of their constituents, but also highlighting the issues around funding and the lack of awareness. And it is incredibly shocking that the only source of funding for the research into this disease is from the Friends of FOP Friends. So also want to recognise the work they have done and thank them as well. As we have heard, FOP comes from a mutation of the ACVR1 gene, causing muscles, tendons and ligaments to convert to unwanted bone growth, starting from very young age, where it debilitates and disables before ultimately progressing to immobility and ultimately death. While progress happens at different rates, both naturally and due to trauma, which it induces itself, most people with FOP are immobile by the age of 30, and the average, of course, yes.
On the way for her generosity. I think she's touched on an enormously important point that I didn't touch on in my comments. Lots of people think this is all about trauma. This is all about bruising or impact, but actually, for a lot of people that have this terrible, terrible condition, there's no logic, there's no trauma, it just develops and goes through. So you've got the two sides of it. Trauma, yes, and that's where the research, I think, is so important into this particular condition.
Thank you. I absolutely agree, and there's absolutely need for research and investment into research of all aspects of this illness. I just wanted to add that the shock in life expectancy for people with FOP is on average 40 years. That is absolutely shocking. It is an absolutely horrible condition that nobody would wish upon their worst enemy. And as such, it is clear that we are all in agreement in the need to act to improve outcomes for the approximately 70 people in the UK that we know of at the moment, and everyone living with it across the world who are suffering. Thankfully, we know that action can be effective both in diagnosis and care. On diagnosis, the average age is 8 years old, despite the existence of genetic tests to confirm diagnosis as well as other signs far earlier than that. Usually the benefits of early diagnosis are common sense. It is just a matter of time. Time spent untreated is time that a disease or condition can worsen without treatment. But FOP is different. As I mentioned earlier, and other members have also mentioned, trauma generates FOP activity and worsening the condition and speeding up its progress. And Any time spent undiagnosed, as I said, is time where trauma will occur unknowingly, not least in young children who are not only particularly robust, but also not particularly careful. I have a 7-month-old myself, and I know it's really difficult to stop little babies from actually moving around. So we don't need to stretch our mind to imagine the accidental trauma that could take place up to the age of 8 in children with in a child with FOP. In the first instance, early diagnosis avoids investigative and diagnostic procedures that can themselves trigger irreversible FOP activity in this individual. But it doesn't stop there. Early diagnosis means other adaptive adaptations can be made at home and at school, as we've heard from my my honourable friend for Wythenshawe and South East, the adaptations that have been made for Oliver in the school, and using alternatives for potential damaging immunisations, usually injected into muscle, establishing knowledgeable clinical care. And of course, simple behavioural changes to avoid unnecessary trauma in these individuals. These simple things can make a tremendous difference. Yet the genetic test, which can make this happen, can only be requested by specialist clinicians, of which there aren't many. Given how few people suffer from FOP too, the likelihood of this happening prior to a diagnosis seems monumentally low, let alone at the optimal time. The Directory of Approved Tests for the NHS Genomics Medicine Service will be updated next April. And we've heard already the honourable members call for the government to ensure that FOP is included in this. I hope to hear the Minister commit to heeding these calls shortly. I would also urge the Minister to explore other avenues too, whether technology that improves doctors' awareness of symptoms of newborn genetic screening, which will impact far beyond FOP and help many of the 1 in 17 people who live with a rare condition. The government has already set out its vision for this in the Rare Diseases Framework, as we heard earlier from other honourable members. So I don't think anything new is being asked of today, simply for them to follow through on its promises. And while diagnosis is, as is often the case, especially with rare diseases where the difference can be made, improving standards of care for those living with FOP can also be transformation, as we've heard from other members too. With so few specialists or experienced clinicians, it is of no surprise that the levels of care vary. But that doesn't mean that this is a status quo that has to be maintained. The nature of FOP means that some activity needs urgent action, and of course, specialist assistance is needed throughout. The Rare Diseases Framework offers an opportunity here too, so I would be keen to hear from the Minister what plans the government has to improve care for those with FOP universally throughout this mechanism, and ensure that all those living with it now and in the future get the care that they need. And my final point is a broader one, Sir Gail. That applies to rare diseases in general. We have many of these debates, and quite rightly, as every person who lives with a rare disease has a different experience, but collectively, they affect us as many as 3.5 million people across the UK. While individual approaches are needed, a collective approach is also important, and I welcomed the publication of the Rare Diseases Framework. Not only can collective action help improve the standards of diagnosis, treatment and care, but individual approaches can help others. For example, increased research into FOP, as we've heard today, could help joint replacements, military injuries, burns, supporting injuries, osteoporosis, heart disease, chronic anemia, and even brain cancers. And this principle will apply across the rare diseases spectrum. So it is disappointing that after the Rare Diseases Framework was published, the then Public Health Minister confirmed that there was no new funding allocated. So my ask of the Minister and my question of the Government is very simple. How then will the Minister deliver the priorities they have set out in this framework? Thank you, Sir Roger. That's my contribution.
Minister Maria Caulfield.
Thank you, Sir Roger. Can I start by thanking the Honourable Member for Carshalton and Wallington for leading us in this debate today. I think it's incredible that a condition that affects less than 100 people across the UK has generated so much support, and I think that's testament to everyone involved. And I particularly want to pay tribute to my right honourable friend from Hemel Hempstead, for always putting his weight behind this campaign and sharing the experience of his constituent Lexi and the impact that this condition has on her life and the life of her families, but also to the campaigners and the FOP friends for their important work in this space, and to all of those across the United Kingdom who are affected. And I think, we heard the story of Oliver from the Honourable Member for Withamshire and Sale East. And again, it's through these stories that we really learn the full impact of this disease. It's not just a condition that young children have to live with, but just the ordinary day-to-day things that they can no longer do, which may worsen their condition or may have, shorten their life expectancy as well. We also heard from the Honourable Member for North Antrim around Zoe and Lucy, the two people we know of in Northern Ireland who have this condition. And I think this debate, if nothing else, has highlighted and raised awareness of the condition. So there may be parents out there whose children have similar symptoms who may now think about pushing for investigations to see if their children are affected as well. And it's really important that rare diseases such as FOP get the attention and resources that other more common conditions routinely have, and the resources that they really routinely have as well. Individually, rare diseases by their very nature are very rare. We've heard today that collectively 1 in 17 people will be affected by a rare disease at some point in their lifetime, and this does amount to 3.5 million people in the UK currently. And the Government has recognised the issues and challenges faced by people with rare diseases, such as FOP. And for too long, these rare diseases have been the Cinderella of conditions, where resources have traditionally been targeted to those most affected by most conditions. But this government is actually the first government to change that and to really raise the profile of rare diseases, not just in terms of awareness, but in terms of resources as well. As we've heard today, FOP is a very rare genetic condition where abnormal bone development occurs where bone shouldn't normally grow, and it has the most debilitating effects. And whether that's reducing mobilisation or even going as far as respiratory and heart failure, the tragic situation is that while there's some medication that can treat some of the symptoms, there's no actual effective treatment for this disease, and certainly no cure. And we've heard the effects that this has on life expectancy for the various youngest people in our society. And we're not really 100% sure of the causes of this, because while a genetic mutation does happen, we don't know if that's a hereditary condition. It is in some cases, but in many it happens spontaneously. And so there's a huge amount of research that needs to be done, not just in terms of treatment and ideally curative treatment of this condition, but understanding the cause of it and why it happens in the first place. And that's really, I think, what the petitioners have called for today, is that research into that very area. But frustrating for rare diseases is that in any clinical research, the more people that are affected, the quicker you usually find the results. I will give way, yeah.
I think the point the Minister has made is really very important that I correct. There is no evidence at all that this is hereditary, and the gene that is affected is at conception. So that bit of research we have now, and we know that's why the gene testing can happen. But please, can we just correct the record? It is not a hereditary condition.
Yeah, I think I was pretty clear that it's happened spontaneously, and it's a genetic condition, but not necessarily hereditary. But it can, and I think I was pretty clear that it happened spontaneously in the cases that we know of. But the point I was making is, in terms of research, to find quick answers to many research questions, you need a large number of people involved. And the frustrating thing with rare diseases is, ironically, that it affects so few people that even if there was a wealth of research, the low numbers means that research results are often frustratingly slow. And that's through no one's fault. That's the nature of rare diseases. But that is why the government has brought in the rare diseases framework, because what we want to do is many rare diseases can pool the resources together in terms of bringing research forward. And the government's committed to increasing spending on research by 2026 to 2027 by £22 billion, moving our target of having 2.4% of our GDP in research and development by 2027. We really recognise that research is the answer to most of the questions that have been asked today, and we are significantly increasing the funding to make that happen. And central to our ambition, and a number of colleagues across all sides of the chamber have raised this today, is the UK Rare Diseases Framework, which was launched in January and for the first time ever has set 4 main ambitions for rare diseases. The first is getting a faster diagnosis, and we've heard today how important that is for FOP, because the longer children have symptoms that are not diagnosed as FOP, the more likely they are to come to harm. And we heard today whether that's playing in the playground or even coming in contact with people with flu or colds can make their condition significantly worse. And so getting that faster diagnosis is absolutely crucial. Increasing the awareness amongst healthcare professionals, again, absolutely crucial, as we heard today, because even doing something as innocent as a biopsy to try and find out the cause can have negative effects. And the ambition to increase awareness among healthcare professionals is crucial. I know, as a nurse of 25 years, I've never come across a case. And I'm sure there are many GPs and many hospital doctors as well who will also be in the same position. So again, increasing that awareness is absolutely crucial. The third ask is the better coordination of care. So there's a treatment pathway that if you are affected by this condition or any rare disease condition, that there is a clear pathway that you know, Sir Roger, should be followed. But for me, the fourth ambition is the most crucial, and I think will be of the most benefit to parents and those affected by the disease, is improving access to specialist care, treatment and drugs. And we've heard today there's only really 3 specialists dealing with this condition, and it's important to support those areas which are specialising in this, because they are the ones that will be asking the valid research questions and be able to undertake that research itself. So for me, that is absolutely crucial. So alongside industry, medical research charities and specialists, the government is funding research into rare conditions such as FOP via the National Institute of Health Research and also UK Research and Innovation. And through this, the Department of Health and Social Care is investing over £1 billion every year to fund and enable research to happen. And I am concerned to hear if campaigners and FOP friends are not finding that the specialist centres are being able to access that. Because in the past 5 years, the NIHR has funded 1 study into FOP, which has specifically looked at, and it's been run at their Biomedical Research Centre, on the potential of repurposing sarasatinib, which is an ovarian cancer drug, to see if it will work with this condition. And also, there have been 7 other studies which would have relevance to FOP that are also being funded. And my offer really is, if those who are working in this field are not able to access that funding for their research projects, the Clinical Research Network offers a flexible package of free support to help plan and place and successfully deliver clinical research in any of these rare diseases fields. And so I would, very happy to meet with both campaigners, with the specialists in these areas, if they're not getting access to that, because that support is available to them.
The Minister has took the words right out of my mouth. Sir Roger. Will the Minister then meet with the specialist civil servants in her department with the campaigners, not a huge group, just a few people, to come together to work out how they can access this and how they can get a successful bid in so that these children can get the help they need?
Absolutely, very happy to, because I think part of this will probably be coordination of what funding is there and what help and support there is for researchers, and then bringing the researchers together as well. Because can I reassure those who've signed the petition that the NIHR doesn't ring-fence funds for research. It's open to everyone, whether you've got one of the most common diseases in the country or one of the rarest diseases. This research fund of £1 billion is available to all, funding applications to any aspect of human health. And so when applications come forward, they're subject to peer review, so their research colleagues will look at it and judge it, with awards being made on the basis of clinical need, and clearly today we've heard of the clinical need that exists, the value to healthcare services, value for money and scientific quality. So there's no barrier to people applying for this funding. And since 2010, the Medical Research Council has contributed funding towards 3 projects underpinning relevance to FOP and underlying conditions as well, totalling over 6.6 million. And outside of these studies, the UKRI and NIHR have also been looking at supporting musculoskeletal health, which again, although not directly FOP specific, will have relevance to those conditions. Oh, of course.
I just wanted to take it back to the comments you made a moment ago about the trials for new drugs being limited to a very small number of people because it is a rare disease. And I was just wondering in my mind what the solution to that is. I mean, do we try and get people with FOP all the way around the world to participate in a trial? I'm not sure how many people would be needed for a trial for it to be validated by the Minister's department. There were 107 in the trial which I mentioned, which I presume is too small. But I'm just wondering how that is overcome when, in each individual country there are only a very small number of people to do the trials on.
Yep, absolutely. So just to be clear, it's not the government who will be validating these trials. It will be the scientific community, and whether if it's drug-related, it will be the MHRA who would then go on to change licences if they found a treatment that was applicable to FOP. But in very many conditions where there are such low numbers, very often there are global studies, and this funding wouldn't be restricted just to a UK-based study. If it was part of a global study, I'm sure that would be acceptable too. But that is why I think it would be helpful to meet, so that the support and kind of mentorship that is available to researchers who are thinking of applying for funding could bottom out some of those very issues. And I just want to kind of reassure colleagues that raised a number of concerns, just to reassure them in this debate that rare diseases are being pushed up the agenda. The Rare Diseases Framework that was published in January is the first of its kind, and it hopefully should give reassurance to parents and children with FOP that this is an absolute priority. For too long, rare diseases, because they're low in number, haven't had the significance, haven't had the priority, haven't had the attention that other more common diseases with lots of campaigners, lots of patients affected often have. And so by the framework itself really will push this up to the top of the agenda. The second reassurance I can give is that funding is available. There's £1 billion a year for clinical research across the board, and just because it's a rare disease, Sir Roger, does not exclude it from applying for these funds. It does make research harder from a practical point of view, as the Honourable Member for South West Bedfordshire highlighted, but it doesn't mean that they can't apply and that there aren't other criteria applied to lower volume scenarios. And thirdly, just to reassure that clinical research is happening, there's 1 or 2 studies that have taken off in this area, but often that's the catalyst that needs to happen. And I'm hearing from colleagues across the room who have constituents affected that there's a real desire to do more research, and very often that's what's needed more than anything, is to find the researchers who want to do the research, who have research questions, whether that's in diagnosis, treatment, or ultimately a cure. The funding is there to help support that, and there is practical help and support to get those studies into fruition. So to reassure colleagues that as the Minister, I do believe that research is the answer to many of the questions that have been asked today. I'm very aware of how distressing this condition is and the impact it has, not just on the quantity of a young person's life, but the quality of their life as well. And that the government is committed to all rare diseases in terms of trying to ensure that they get better access to the resources that are there, but particularly for FOP, I'm sure that we can work with colleagues across this House to deliver on some of the questions that they have asked today. Thank you, Sir Roger.
Elliot Colburn to wind up the debate, please.
Thank you, Sir Roger. And can I begin by thanking our colleagues for their contributions today? I really do feel like this debate has demonstrated this House at its best. We've had some really powerful contributions from colleagues today. It was a real pleasure to hear from the Honourable Member from Withershall and Sale East more about Oliver's story and about Oliver's life. Can I express my thanks to him for bringing that to the House today. My right honourable friend, the member for Hemel Hempstead, has been a real champion of this issue for so many years, and his expertise and knowledge in this area we are truly privileged to have been party to this afternoon. So can I thank him? I will happily give way.
Just on that point, there's lots of praise going around this House for the MP for Hemel Hempstead, but actually Alex and Dave Robbins are the reason my constituents have the most on the petition, and actually for my colleagues around this House, along with other help, have had so much. They deserve the praise, not the MP for Hemel Hempstead.
Thank you very much, and I thank my right honourable friend for that intervention, and he's absolutely right. He's just taken my next sentence out of my mouth, if he would pass on the best wishes of the whole House to Lexi as well, I'm sure that honourable members, I would be more than happy to. Could I thank the honourable member from North Antrim for bringing Zoe and Lucy's story, the two only known cases in Northern Ireland, demonstrating that this is indeed a UK-wide issue, and I echo the comments of the SNP spokesperson about the four-nation approach. I think that's incredibly important. I'm also incredibly grateful to my right honourable friend, the member for South West Bedfordshire, for talking us through some of the issues around research, but also some of the suggestions that he made around research funding in particular, I do think are very well worth exploring, so I do hope that that can be taken away. It is absolutely incredible that given the rarity of this disease that we have reached this point where over 100,000 people have signed a petition to bring us all here today, and I think it does demonstrate the power of the petition system, and it's really quite humbling as a member of the Petitions Committee to see a campaign like this really take off and bring us all here today. And I do think that this is only the beginning. There was a lot of reassuring stuff in the Minister's reply. I'm particularly happy of the offer to facilitate a meeting with campaigners and researchers, and I don't think I'm too bold to suggest that the Petitions Committee will be happy to help facilitate that and to help coordinate that, and we will definitely be keeping a keen interest as a committee, I'm sure, on the progress of this campaign. Can I finish by once again thanking the petitioners, in particular the families of those living with FOP who have brought us here this afternoon. It must be incredibly difficult to have to reiterate these stories over and over again, and how incredibly upsetting that must be. Particularly, I would like to thank Chris, who's in the public gallery, for his attendance here this afternoon. And can I once again thank colleagues for being here to kick off what I'm sure is only the first of many discussions that we will have on this issue. And on that basis, Sir Roger, I beg to move.
Question is that this House considered E-petition 590405 relating to research into Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva. So many of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Sitting stands adjourned.
The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended.